Hello, and welcome to Sports Talk, The Generation Gap, episode 13. Let's meet the family, starting from oldest to youngest. There's my dad, Bob, Charlie, myself, Bobby, Ben, and Nick. So, we're talking about youth sports today, the state of youth sports in the United States, and whether we're in a good place, a bad place, whether it's better than it was in years past. I know myself growing up, youth sports had already kind of gotten to a point where things were starting to be specialized a lot. Coaches really wanted you to be playing one sport as once you got to the more elite levels and higher age groups, towards high school and things like that. There's also been a big development over the last, several years in AAU sports, basketball predominantly, and then in football, you have these academies for premier athletes to go to and get ready for college football, like the IMG academies of the world and things like that, where it's really become more of an industry almost than an actual just youth sport. Some of the decisions they're making, it seems like, are because of money, how much money they can bring in rather than necessarily what's best for the athletes or developing talent. Also, looking at other sides of things over the years, it seems like parents in sports sometimes get a little bit more out of control, and it seems like that might be getting worse over time. We've seen stories of coaches, resigning just because they can't deal with the parents anymore, or referees, not wanting to deal with it. There's actually a shortage of referees in youth sports these days. And so really across different landscapes in different sports, we're seeing an interesting trend that, may be bad at this point. Dad, from your perspective, growing up playing youth sports and then eventually coaching youth sports, how have you seen kind of the development over the years and the way things are trending?
It's almost impossible to compare sports in my childhood with the state of youth sports today. When I was a kid growing up in Monroe, you had really one organized sports option, and that was summer baseball. Period. That was it. You did it or you didn't do it. And I always did, at least up through junior high school. There was then a lot more pickup sports. In fact, even when I was a very young kid, a lot of it just neighborhood. Just kids come out and play. We play baseball or sometimes football. Sometimes fathers would get involved. We had a great time. It was almost idyllic in some ways. Looking back, it was all just pure fun. Then when you and your sister and your brother all came up, I got involved in coaching, partly because they needed coaches. And so for a span of about 20 years, I was coaching, believe it or not, ice hockey as well as soccer, two sports I hadn't played as a kid. So it was a pretty interesting situation. It was not, real high-end competitive stuff, but I which tells me a lot, because you already had a few parents who were way over the top into it, and very carefully tracking their kids' minutes and getting all worked up about what position they played, and on and on. And sometimes at games there would be some parents who were a little bit out of control. And all of this, by all indications, is a lot worse now than it was, 15 years ago, 20 years ago when you guys were playing. So it is a concern. It varies a little bit from sport to sport, but some sports have become, as you noted, extremely specialized. Soccer, baseball, you name it, and of course football, and the activities span the year. There was a lot of argument just a few years ago that kids really benefited even athletically from playing multiple sports because they had a wider range of developed abilities as they reached the end of their high school careers. But the lure of the college athletic scholarship, now made worse by NIL, is propelling a lot of insanity in all of this. And you see it in many respects. I look around at the typical high school football stadium these days, and I'm just floored at how much a lot of communities are willing to invest in those facilities. I mean, they're very close to D3 level facilities in many cases. It's extraordinary. And again, I think back to when Ben was in high school, and at the very time they were erecting a beautiful new football stadium with a great artificial surface and terrific scoreboard and so on and so forth. I remember eliminating their French language program, among other things. And I thought, what's going on here? So, yeah, it's a little bit out of control. I'm not sure it's in the best interests of the kids in the long run, but the incentive structure that we have in our society is such that all these things are likely to continue.
Yeah, it has been pretty amazing to see, just the investments that go into this and the facilities. Yeah, I mean, it's almost become like college sports, where that's part of the allure of trying to attract talent is what type of facilities do you have? And that's really, gone down to the high school level and maybe even beyond of schools trying to attract talent there. Now, Charlie, just kind of going down on the age spectrum here a little bit, you were a pretty elite athlete from what I hear back in your day, playing golf and running cross country and things like that. Did you ever feel any pressure to specialize at all when you were in high school, or is that still, years off in the distance?
No, I don't think specialization had really crept in yet. Nowhere near what it has today. So I think by and large, my experience tracked pretty well with what Bob has described. In Monroe, Wisconsin, when I was growing up, there was organized baseball, and then I would say organized basketball became a thing as well at some point. I also got involved in organized golf at probably when I was 10 years old. So there was probably just a little more, a few more organized activities for me than there were for Bob. But as Bob said, there was all kinds of pickup stuff going on in the neighborhood, going on at the school gym next door, where we were fortunate enough to somehow gain access to a set of keys. So we had a ton of great 3-on-3 basketball games and floor hockey games that over the years, I mean, our dad would be involved in those too. So those were good times. Eventually I too coached both Nick and Kelly, coached them both in soccer and in basketball. I did embrace it as an opportunity to hopefully instill some good, some good, I guess, morals into those kids. And one of the things that I really stressed was, number one, you never, ever, ever complain to a ref. And, just kind of stress that refs are never going to take a game away from us. And they may make a bad call at the end of the game. We might lose by 1, but I'm pretty sure there was like 30 other opportunities preceding that moment where we could have won the game, right? So, I think that sports can still be a great place to learn a lot of those lessons. And whereas I do agree that by and large, youth sports are trending in a less positive way, okay, compared to what they once were. I think they're still in most ways a really positive thing. I mean, in the age of video games. It's a great way for kids to get out and be active. They're learning teamwork. They're making friendships. They're developing work ethic. So there's a lot of really good attributes still. A couple things I would point out that maybe haven't been mentioned yet. There is an upside to specialization. I think generally when people see individual athletes specializing, that's seen in kind of a negative way, and I totally get that. And it probably is the case that most of those athletes would, for their own sake, might be better off if they played a few different sports throughout the year. However, every time you do have, say, an elite athlete specialize, and maybe it's the kid that back in our day would have been the point guard, and he would have been the shortstop, and he would have been the quarterback. Now he's choosing one of those sports and he's focusing on that sport. Well, it does open up opportunities for other kids. Okay. All of a sudden there's a chance for another kid to be in the limelight. So one other aspect that I think is important in terms of youth sports and society overall is that back in our day, I feel like there were a lot of kids from very different backgrounds that were coming together to play sports. These days, especially with youth sports becoming more costly and more time consuming, I think that happens less and less. And access to youth sports is, more and more it's becoming kind of a well-to-do kids thing. And, there's research showing that some of the societal, political, income inequality divides, all those things today are partly a function of what's happening with kids who are not mixing with kids that are unlike them. And so I think it may be what we're seeing with sports these days, maybe in part contributing to some of the problems we see more broadly in society overall.
Yeah, really interesting point. And kind of piggybacking off of that a little bit, looking at some of the recent international events that have taken place, we talked a while back about the World Baseball Classic, where the U.S. did not win, and it seems like we may not be the dominant force in baseball anymore. Soccer, obviously, the Women's World Cup. We bowed out fairly early in that tournament. The FIBA basketball tournament just finished up. The U.S. did not even medal. So, Benny, I wonder if some of the stuff we're seeing now at the international level might be because of a lack of development in talent at the youth level. And maybe there is something to Charlie's point where if we're having a situation where not all players are having access to be able to play, maybe we're missing out on some of that elite talent that could make it all the way to the top, but they quit at a younger age just because they don't have the access, can't afford it, and maybe we're missing out on some of that talent.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting topic. I have a kind of a lot of experience kind of with the toxicity of modern youth sports. I've had quite a few experiences with that in my life. Yeah, in terms of access, I'm sure that can happen. I think another aspect is just also, the U.S., I would have to say, from all the countries I've ever been to and lived in, has the most sports obsessed culture I've ever come across. And there's so many different sports that people are playing. So every single sport is going to be diluted of talent because so many people are playing different sports and competing for athletes across the country in different sports. So, the U.S. may sort of hover around the top of a sport off and on, but the U.S. is competing in more sports than any other country in the world. You look at the Summer Olympics, we dominate every year. The Winter Olympics, only parts of our country have the ability to even train for the Winter Olympics, yet we still are in the top 3 every year in that. I think Norway wins the most, and that's just because that's all they do all day in Norway is play winter sports. So it's a tiny country, in terms of population. But Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've had a lot of good points here in terms of like specializing in sports. I know talking to in the past, even Peter Vermees, who's the head coach of Sporting Kansas City, the professional soccer team in Kansas City. He was talking about how he thinks that the lack of uh, players playing lots of different sports growing up is actually bad for professional athletes in soccer and other sports, just because there are other skills that you develop and you think about things differently if you're playing different sports. People can become sort of one dimensional if they're focusing too much on one particular sport and not develop their bodies to be able to do lots of different things. Um, I know my dad mentioned Leavenworth High School, which I have mixed feelings of Leavenworth High School. Went there for 2 years and transferred, so that says a lot, I think. But it was funny when they brought in that $1 million stadium, with instant replay, and had like 15 to 20 high school football coaches for a program that won like a couple games a year. You know, it was completely insane. And to add, sort of icing on the cake, I remember taking AP history courses, and almost every teacher of an AP history course was a football coach who had a degree in education focused though on physical education, not even history. So priorities there were certainly based around the football team, I would say, and they've yet to win a national championship or anything like that. So just shows that the investments haven't quite paid off. The other things I've witnessed, though, I think across youth sports in general, is just I think there's a lack of perspective in the U.S. As I mentioned before, we are a sports obsessed culture, and I think as a result of that, there's a lot of wannabe pros. There's a lot of parents that want to live vicariously through their kids, and pressure them to do well because maybe they themselves never became the star athlete they hoped for, but boy, their kid's gonna be, or else they're not only the failure as a child wanting to become a pro athlete, but a failure as a parent. And so they're like, yelling and huffing and puffing at their kids on the sidelines. You also have coaches that, may want to be pro coaches. Again, people that maybe didn't become the athletes in high school that then become kind of these little sort of egomaniacs yelling at their players all the time, or, running practices like a dictator 5 days a week, as if, the schools are going to, kids are going to high school, just because they're becoming pro athletes, right? That's the whole goal of high school. In reality, they're trying to get some sort of education. But that's not necessarily, what people are prioritizing. And then you get just in general, because of this culture, you get a lot of kids that grow up thinking that their only potential is becoming an athlete and there's no other option. How many kids dream of becoming a pro athlete and as a result never become one, and then they're stuck wondering, what the hell am I going to do with my life? It happens constantly, and obviously much more people are in that position than being in the position of competing for a roster spot in the pros. So I think it's a major cultural issue, and one that is really lacking perspective, and hopefully people can start to realize that it's not the end all be all, and we should be a little bit more laid back about this process so we can start fixing it and improving. I think the teams will improve as well if we're a little bit more balanced perspective wise. So
Yeah, some good points there. And yeah, getting back to the specialization aspect of it, you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the NFL. He grew up playing baseball, and some of the insane throws that he makes are because he was a baseball player. So that's just proof of, mixing things up a little bit. Playing different sports can have a major benefit down the road, because he's, really changed the game with some of the unbelievable throws and arm angles, he can put out there. But Nick, so being the youngest of the group here, and the closest out of playing youth sports, do you think it really is getting worse in your opinion, or does it maybe just seem worse because of the institution of social media? You have all these viral videos going about parents being absolutely nuts. So is this just kind of getting blown out of proportion a little bit because of that, or do you think there really is a problem?
I think the NIL has kind of been an accelerant to what was already happening. I don't think I was playing youth sports when that was kind of that extent. It's like the virality of all of it. I think the carrot of college scholarships, prestige as being a college athlete, being, if you can compare it to my dad or Bob's generation, my hunch is that it was negligible compared to what it is now in terms of the value, one, just the like the inflationary cost of going to college, but also yeah, the prestige of it, especially when you throw social media and NIL on top of it. The incentive to become a college athlete is just way bigger than it was before. So with that, it's not surprising that you're seeing youth athletes, specialize at the age of 10. And it's interesting to hear you guys talk about the kind of the pickup nature of sports when you were kids. I think the original sense of reason people play sports is for play. It's a fun thing to do. Out of that, competition grows an organization with it, which is cool. I think that's all really good stuff. But it seems like the essence of why kids are playing sports, to make friends, to meet people, to just play the game for the fun of it. When you drill in the specialization of it, with the end goal of a college scholarship, if not more, I feel like that'll get lost. And I wouldn't argue that, one kid who's gonna only play basketball has a worse chance than somebody who's gonna play, soccer, basketball, and football. Like I don't know if you can argue either way, which athlete has a better chance of, I guess, developing better. Like Steph Curry, he played golf as a kid though. You see some hand-eye coordination there. But yeah, the specialization stuff, you can see both ways. I mean, the injuries among specialized athletes are higher. I don't think that's shocking when you have an athlete that's just less diverse, physically. But yeah, I go back just to the, I think too, I think Daddy mentioned the kind of video game culture, how it's good to have organized youth sports. I think it's probably harder. I mean, it seems like such an all-in venture these days to be in sports. I wonder, how many kids are kind of on the fringes or, maybe in the middle of that. Maybe 20 years ago, it'd be way more, easy to get into youth sports, where it's not some part-time job, or, the expectations are just way higher than they should be. It just seems like a not inclusive environment. So yeah, I don't think it's great. I think like the reason kids are getting into sports, probably pushed by their parents, isn't for the right reason. I think just like the pickup nature of sports, from what I can tell, is way less than it used to be, and that's where it really exists on a cultural level. So yeah, I don't think it's great these days. I think it has gotten worse. We probably have better athletes, and we'll continue to have better athletes. But if the only goal of sports in a culture, in a country, is to have the best athletes, the 1% of people actually participate with that, then I don't think we're doing a good job.
Yeah, some good points there. And it almost seems like the house league or the recreational league is almost becoming extinct. It's either you're playing at a fairly elite level on some sort of travel team, or there's nothing. Like that's the only option. Pay to play, and you're in one of these more elite leagues where you're trying out for the team and stuff like that. And when I was growing up, when there was just house leagues where just anybody could play, it seems like whether it's just lack of numbers in terms of participation, or just the specialization of things, or really the parents driving things where they're wanting things to be much more competitive. It seems like we're just getting away from the essence of it, of the fun. And so hopefully that changes, and we see more of that where it's just pickup games, or those just recreational leagues where anybody can just get together and play. So
yeah, it also interesting point too. I think like the best athletes out there seem like they're just playing. Like doesn't seem like they were ever. I'm sure they've all worked extremely hard. It seems like they've been able to maintain that play aspect to it.
That's right.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at those generational talents.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all people that just love the game and
Yeah.
they don't feel like they're practicing or it's a chore. They just love to do it. And so they do it all the time. And, that's how they become the best. But yeah, so real good topic there. I'm glad we tackled that one. But let's see, going forward here, Charlie, you want to take us through drinks?
Sure, I'll lead off in my quest for 100 non-alcoholic days in 2023. I've again opted for the mead beer tonight. Had this before, the Green Canvas, brewed in suburban Madison. 3 milligrams THC, 18 milligrams CBD. If these episodes went like 90 minutes, I'd be close to asleep at the end. Somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes, this thing kind of kicks me in the side of the head, but until then, I'm good to go. So, Bob, how about you?
Well, I haven't actually opened it yet, but I've got a nice Australian wine, Kings of Prohibition. It's trying to play on the old theme of alcohol prohibition in the United States and the interesting lore and culture that it generated on the sidelines. I noticed this bottle's dedicated to Al Capone. And anyway, I haven't actually opened it yet, but it does meet my basic criteria. It's not terribly expensive. It's got a screw-off cap, so I don't have to go looking for the bottle opener and stuff like that. But I'll let you know after I've tasted it how we're doing here. Meanwhile, just working off a basic bottle of Hy-Vee water. Hydrated.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Oh,
Yeah.
boy. Someone's acting anyway. Ben, how about you?
Well, today I've decided to enlighten my fans with a bottle of great value purified drinking water. This is interesting because it is a product of reverse osmosis. So purification standards are pretty high, pretty exciting stuff. If it wasn't purified, who knows what I would be drinking right now. So I typically will drink bottled water because I'm not a big fan of the local tap in Indianapolis, which has had a history of some issues. So not too excited about that. But I know for some people that might not be fair to just have water. So I also decided to spice up a little bit because I know people are watching this intently. What is Benny going to choose this week? They're thinking about it at night, just wondering. And I don't blame them. I would be curious too. So I also have a little bit of Boone's County small batch bourbon with me. Got in good old Kentucky. And born in 1833. So I don't think this particular batch was made in 1833, but maybe it was. Who knows? And I don't really drink out of a glass. I don't really like to drink a glass of whiskey. That's a little too much for me. So I prefer to do shots of whiskey. And that's what I have today because I like to just live life to the fullest and just do, straight up, get it through, get it over with. And so to all my fans out there, cheers. Yep. Next.
Okay, Nick, can you top that?
I can't. I cannot. You're drinking actual tap water. This is from Lake Michigan. Something interesting about Lake Michigan, the water, that before 1900, Chicago River flow was out into Lake Michigan, making it dirty water. I don't know if they drank it. They might have. It was 1900. And then in 1900, they switched the direction somehow, some engineering feat. So now it flows from Lake Michigan down to St. Louis, making this water awfully clean. So no bottled water for me.
You have a shot or something you're gonna drink now, or
I don't want to steal any thunder from Ben. think I'll let him keep that.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to top.
Yeah.
I know you, Bobby. Normally, you have a pretty interesting beer that you're partaking in.
Yeah, it is another beer night, but this one is a little bit more standard.
It's an invisible beer.
Exact right angle. You might be able to see it. Just a Blue Moon for me tonight. It's one of my favorite Belgian wheat ales, and always goes down real smooth.
All right, and it looks like John has chosen to join us.
Yeah,
John, what
I'm,
do you think this evening?
I'm sorry. I just ran to get to my phone here so I could hop on here. I wish I had something really exciting to tell you, but we do have a very nice pond in my backyard here. And if you go down there and you stick a bucket in the water, you can pull out some delicious water. And you can see that is clear. I mean, you could swim in that, you could bathe in that, you could, probably give birth to a baby of that nice clean water there. So anyway, that's what I'm enjoying right now. But, come kick off here a little bit when Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are going at it, we'll probably find something a little more appropriate.
Huh. I've seen that water. I don't think I would drink that, John.
Well, it's amazing that it puts hair on your chest and all kinds of interesting things. So I highly recommend it, actually. It's from God's country.
Well, maybe that's why you got a detached retina. Anyway.
And this episode's been sponsored by Giardia. So
You guys are jealous, man. This is good stuff. It's got a little texture to it.
All right. Well, Bobby, back to you.
All right. So I don't think we have any updates as far as picks go. There's nothing that is really completed since the last time, unless Benny, you've thought of something.
no, I don't think we have any. I think let's see. We can think about whether we want to get John's take on the previous topic. I don't think we did a very good job of informing John about today's episode. So I apologize as being the Zoom leader for that
Yeah. I was scrambling to see that this group text, but my name didn't appear on it. Obviously.
Yeah, we just wrote I think I just emailed the Zoom link to people, and then Charlie said, "What's the topic today?" And I was like, "Oh, well, maybe John will get that." It's an hour beforehand. But yeah, I assumed that Charlie would tell you these things, John. I apologize that your younger brother has failed you once again. It's really sad. So I expect.
I don't know if you guys.
I like to say it surprises me that there's a stunning lack of leadership in this group, but it doesn't at all. So anyway, I am here to save the day. So what were you guys talking about?
Youth sports.
Youth sports.
Yeah, problems with it.
You know what? I think youth sports is a great thing. I think you learn a lot, learn about team play and leadership. Probably have to be a little bit careful with some parents getting a little carried away, trying to live vicariously through their kids. I know when I coached like middle school basketball and whatnot, we had some pretty active parents, and I see that a little bit in some other sports as well. But I think generally it's a really good thing. I think as long as you do it safe, you do it in a good, healthy environment, it's a wonderful thing. I can only see promoting it and making it grow even more.
Sounds good.
Very good. Thanks, John.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't think we have any picks to update on, but the next thing we were going to predict was World Series. Now, are we going just champion, or are we just going the champion and the runner-up? Or
I think champion and runner-up would be good. That keeps us focused on both races, both pennant races.
Okay, that makes sense. So,
can I start with this one?
What's that?
Can I start with this one?
Yeah.
I say dream matchup. And this may never happen again, but I think it's a dream matchup for someone who's living in Wisconsin but grew up a Baltimore Orioles fan. Is you've got two red hot teams, one of the Baltimore Orioles, which when I was a little kid, they were good. They've gone through decades of futility. So it's really good to see them up there with a team that has the talent to actually take it all the way against a Brewers team that is complete with hitting, defense, and pitching. I think that would be awesome. I would actually watch as many games. I'd watch a full length of these games. And I think I'd really, really get geared up. I think this is the year we have a really classic World Series between the Milwaukee Brewers and the Baltimore Orioles.
So who would you pick as the winner then?
You know, because I grew up an O's fan, I got to go with the O's. Orioles in 6.
Okay, even picking the series. All right.
If I can jump in real quick, I feel the exact same way as John. The Orioles were my team when I was a kid. The Brewers are my team now, and I've got the two of them in the World Series, and I've got Milwaukee winning it in 7.
Okay. Interesting. Nick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'd love to see Milwaukee in the World Series. I don't think we will. I don't pay a ton of attention to baseball, but it seems like the playoffs, big money teams with expensive pitchers going to do well. So I see the Dodgers or the Tampa Bay Rays. We'll call it in 7.
All right. Benny, how about you?
Well, first off, I'm finding this a little bit interesting, the trend here with the Orioles, and especially people who grew up Oriole fans, given that only my dad, Bob, was actually born in Baltimore and lived there. I'm curious how Charlie and John became Oriole fans as a kid. I'm starting to wonder if this sort of missionary-like aspect of my father contaminated the youth in his household as well as the older brother, because I know that he also pulled the same stunt on me and my brother, as well as basically any other international person he meets. He is this kind of like some type of old-fashioned monk or something that would go across the world to promote Christianity or something like that, and said this is Oriole baseball. So I'm curious to know a little bit about that. But in terms of my prediction, I have watched the Orioles a long time, and I've also seen my dad talk up the Orioles for years and years. This is going to be the year. A lot of good talent in the system. Going to be great. Boom, lost 100 games that year. This is, oh my gosh, last decade is just hilarious. Ongoing joke between me and Bobby is like, what propaganda is Dad going to talk about Orioles baseball? Not that we don't want the Orioles to do well, but it's just Dad is so toxically positive sometimes. It just drives me nuts. So anyway, realistically thinking, though the Orioles are having a great year, and I do think that this team very well could win a World Series, I'm thinking that this World Series, though, is not going to come until next year when their pitching has developed a little bit more. Obviously, when it comes to World Series baseball and playoff baseball in general, it really, really makes a difference to have great starting pitching. And the Orioles starting pitching has been, solid. But I look at the team like the Rays, and you look at the stats of their starting pitchers. They have 4 starting pitchers with an ERA that's 3.50 or below. No other team in baseball has that many starters that are doing really well. And you can really rely on starting pitching in the playoffs because you just let guys go. You're not worried about injuries or managing their innings like you are in the regular season. So I'm thinking that it's probably going to be like the Rays and Braves. Both of them have really good starting pitching staffs, and they also have some pretty good hitters as well, obviously. So I think it'll be the Rays, over the Braves in the World Series.
Interesting. Okay. Dad, what are you thinking?
Okay, well, to sketch the history of all this just briefly as a prelude. I was the one who was born in Baltimore. I was pretty well indoctrinated by my father, who adopted the Orioles during his long stint at Johns Hopkins. And we were literally living within a couple blocks of Memorial Stadium when the Orioles were founded. Same with the Baltimore Colts, as a matter of fact. And so there was a strong identification with the team. And Dad set me straight as a little kid, since I was too young while we were still living in Baltimore to appreciate the wonders on my front doorstep. We got to watch games through the front gate at Memorial Stadium. And so when we were living in New England, and I was about 6, 7 years old, and all my neighbors were Red Sox fans, my father kind of squared me away. He said, "No, that's not your team, bud." And so that pretty well stuck. Anyway, the I think the Orioles have overtaken the Rays, even though you can make a good case that the Rays have perhaps better overall pitching. The Orioles have a great mix. I agree, the Orioles pitching could stand to be a little bit better, and they didn't help themselves quite as much as they possibly should have before the trade deadline. And of course, they also now may have to enter the playoffs without their closer, who's been terrific all season, but hurt his elbow a week and a half ago, and everybody's in suspense now to see whether he'll be able to come back and finish the season, or whether maybe he's headed for Tommy John surgery or something. It's a big difference. But the Orioles have managed to do it with complete play, terrific defense most of the time, and really timely hitting. You know, there's nobody in the Orioles roster who is an MVP candidate offensively, but up and down that roster, there are a bunch of guys who are really productive. And so they look pretty strong. There's nobody in the American League, in my estimation, who is better than the Orioles. The team that worries me is Houston, which still is loaded and has lots of high-end playoff experience and recent World Series titles and so forth. But I'll still give the Orioles a nod just because they've had amazing momentum and have just keep finding ways to win, which ultimately is that intangible thing that is so important. I see Atlanta as the likely opponent. They're inevitable, it seems, just because they've been so consistent the entire season and still have the best record in baseball. But I'll have to go with the Orioles in the end. It shouldn't have happened this year, but I think it very well could. One note about pitching is sometimes you really don't realize the quality of your pitching until you're in a World Series. I go back to the Orioles' first World Series victory in 1966 when they faced the LA Dodgers, who were a considerable favorite. The Dodgers had perhaps the two best pitchers in baseball in Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale in their starting rotation. They were terrific. The Orioles had a bunch of unknowns. You had a 19-year-old Jim Palmer, and you had some other guys who would go on to be great, Dave McNally and so forth. The Orioles swept that series in 4 games and completely shut the Dodgers down. And again, it wasn't until that happened that people realized what a good staff they had. So it pays to wait and see. The Mets, 4 years later, would unveil a pitching staff that shocked everybody, including the Orioles in '69 when the Mets took that series. Guys like Tom Seaver and Kenny Holtzman and so forth. People didn't realize how good that staff was until they performed in the series. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at that. Again, I'll go with Baltimore.
Hey, Bob, I got a comment on that the year that the Mets took out the Orioles, that was quite a surprise. Was that the same year the Orioles had 4 20-game winners?
No, that was the 4 20-game winners were 2 years later, and when they lost to the 71 Pirates.
Yeah, I was going to say they did great pitching, but even then against the Pirates, against a hot team, that pitching couldn't hold up.
Yeah, but the Pirates came in and were just hot in 71. The Orioles led that series 3-1 and ended up
right.
Yeah. So the Orioles wins back then were 66 and 70. And the 70 team was stupendous, had 3 20-game winners and an offensive lineup that people at the time compared to the old Yankees. But yeah, you got to be hot.
You got to be hot. The Pirates, they were Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell. They were hot.
Yep.
It's got who's got momentum going into those series, and that's why to some extent you can throw out the statistics once you get there, because it's a matter of who's in the group, just like in hockey with a hot goalie.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been kind of toiling back and forth between teams in the American League. I've got the Braves coming out of the National League. They're just completely loaded. I mean, you look at Ronald Acuna Jr., arguably the best player in baseball right now. He's third in batting average, leading the majors in hits and steals. Just a tremendous talent. Braves also have Matt Olson, who's leading the majors in home runs and RBIs. There's Spencer Strider, who's arguably the best pitcher in baseball, leading in wins and strikeouts. So the Braves are just completely loaded throughout their lineup, and they have World Series experience. Pretty good combination. So I have them as the National League representative. I was going to pick the Astros as the American League representative because of that championship experience that they have. But I'm watching the Orioles game here on my side screen, and Cal Ripken Jr. is in the ballpark. Orioles are rallying against the Cardinals, and there's a feeling in Baltimore something's going on. So I'm picking the Orioles to make the World Series now. I've changed my pick on the fly. Cal Ripken Jr. convinced me, and I have an epic World Series between the Braves and the Orioles. It's going 7 games. Ultimately, I think Atlanta wins. I don't think the Orioles are ready yet. This Baltimore team reminds me a little bit of the Royals from 2014, a team that just got hot out of nowhere and made it all the way to the World Series and then eventually won the next year. I think the Orioles are close, but not quite. So I have the Braves in 7. So with all that, let's go to what sports updates we have about things we've seen in the world of sports recently. Obviously, we had a first weekend of NFL football, and college football is a couple weeks in now. Nick, what do you have for us?
Predicting great trade this year in NFL. That would be New York Jets sending a first-round draft pick, Green Bay Packers, for Aaron Rodgers. I think that opened up the lane for Jordan Love. He had a perfect passer rating, 3rd and 4th down yesterday. It's a rejuvenated Green Bay offense, and I think Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are poised for a good year this year, playing in 15 minutes here. So, great trade. Excited to see Jordan Love. He's in the oven for about 3 years. Good to see him successful so far. Long season, but love to see it.
Benny, how about you? We got, as Nick mentioned, Aaron Rodgers making his Jets debut tonight. Looked like some of your picks over the weekend of division winners didn't look too hot, but it's a long season. What do you have update us in the sports world?
Well, I stand by my predictions, especially that the Jets are winning the Super Bowl this year. So stay tuned, folks. Looking forward to smoking the Bills today and pretty soon here. I did want to point out, because I do think it's interesting and noteworthy, and especially being from the Kansas City area, the Chiefs lost the Lions their opening game of the season. It's, easy to panic, but I think there is some legitimacy in panicking right now. If you are a Chiefs fan, you look at the fact that their receiving core without Travis Kelce is guys that are certainly talented, but really unproven throughout the course of an entire season. Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, neither one of them have had, I think, even over 500 yards receiving in their entire career for a season. So that is pretty experimental for a team looking to repeat. And I do wonder, that reliance on an aging tight end and Travis Kelce, who's no doubt still the best tight end in the game, but also injury prone, missing a few games every year and probably going to miss more as the career goes on. I think that's risky. I'm not so sure if the Chiefs have the right formula. I'm hoping they do, because I have Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney on my fantasy football team. Luckily, I did not start them last game. But something to think about. Not so sure about the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. All right. So, look, Kadarius Toney has been in the league 3 years, had some injury trouble. That's why he doesn't have a large sample size, but he had a hell of a playoffs, helped us win a Super Bowl. Sky Moore, this is his second year, so let's just chill. He was in a stacked lineup last year, which is why he didn't get a ton of opportunities, which is why he wasn't seeing a lot of action and getting a lot of yards. He had a big playoffs, big Super Bowl, helped us win a title. Travis Kelce is not injury prone. That's absurd. He almost never misses games, and he's always there when you need him. He's always there when you need him in the playoffs. It's 17 game season. Nobody needs to play every game. It's actually better to not play every game. The Chiefs just re-signed Chris Jones today. So the defense that really handled the Lions without the best player on defense just got the best player on defense back. So, I mean, we might go 19-1. Just saying.
Okay,
Anyway,
I rebuttal to this. This is what we call confirmation bias, folks. Okay, someone who's a diehard Chiefs fan that then blindly looks for, cherry picks things to support his hypothesis here. I will say, you're talking about the playoffs and how people perform in the playoffs. I seem to recall
I think that matters a little
a
bit.
former Giants wide receiver named David Tyree who made that game-winning catch with the ball on his head, who, won the Super Bowl that year and then disappeared off the face of the earth. So you could do great things in the playoffs and then never do anything ever again. So I'm not sure if the playoffs are evidence of a long time successful career or not. But
So yeah, Kadarius Toney had a long punt return in the Super Bowl and had an amazing touchdown catch. Sky Moore had a touchdown catch. David Tyree made one catch. It was crazy. But it wasn't like he was scoring touchdowns in the game and had playoffs that led up to it. So let's just chill a little bit. Anyway, moving on. Charlie, how about you? What do you got?
Well, I just want to avoid confrontation. I'm going to move away from Gridiron and to the Lynx. Talk a little bit about the Stricker family. Steve Stricker has had probably the greatest season on the Champions Tour of any golfer ever. He's played 13 tournaments. He's won 5 times, including 3 majors. He's also finished second 5 times. He's kind of lapping the field in terms of money won there this year. And 13 events is a low number of events to play. Most top players have played over 20. But Steve's not the only good stick in the family. He's got a daughter, Bobby, who just missed the first stage of LPGA Tour qualifying by 1 shot. His wife, Nikki, who is his most frequent caddy on the Champions Tour, she just qualified for the U.S. Senior Amateur. And Steve's second child, his daughter, Izzy, who is a senior at Wanakee High School here in Wisconsin. Wanakee, which is actually where this wheat beer is brewed. She just on Saturday shot 65, 7 under par to win local junior invitational. So anyway, there's a lot of good players in that family is all I want to say about that.
Interesting. Okay. Dad, how about you? What do you have?
A quick follow-up on something I mentioned last week, which was women's intercollegiate rugby, which I know all of you follow closely. 2-time defending NIRA champion Dartmouth is out of the gate with a 73-0 victory over Penn State, followed by a 41-13 victory over West Point, who was their opponent in the national championship game 2 years ago. So that's a combined score of 120-13 thus far this season. So they're off to another pretty good start. NFL-wise, I'm not quitting on the Giants just because they were utterly humiliated by the Dallas Cowboys yesterday. Last week, you'll recall, I picked the Giants to win their division. It's a 17-game season, so let's just stay the course.
Very good. Yes, long season indeed. John, do you have anything for us?
Well, just talking about the Giants got thrashed by the Cowboys. I'm not sure any of us saw that coming, but when it's that decisive of a win, you got to be a little concerned about what's going to happen with the Giants this year. Kansas City, I think it's hard to repeat. I think that the team may not have the edge this year, and certainly every other team in the league has got their date with Kansas City circled on that calendar. So I think the Chiefs are going to have a rough time. But I think the big story in the NFL is what transpires tonight. All eyes in New York and what's going on with the Jets. Bringing Aaron Rodgers in, who is really jazzed to play for the Jets. He's been working out. He's been doing the little things in the locker room to really build camaraderie with his teammates. We'll see here in just a little bit, but it's a big story. It'll be a fascinating thing to watch. And you know, I'm a Packer fan, but I'm very supportive of Aaron Rodgers doing something big in New York. So we'll see what happens tonight.
Very good. Yeah. We'll be sure to replay some of this tape when the Chiefs inevitably make it back to the Super Bowl and embarrass the Jets in the playoffs, assuming they make it.
What is going on with you today, Bobby? You are drunk on power. Oh my gosh. Okay. And by the way, I just did a little fact check just because I knew that you would just have to say, you just had to get the last word in there, Bobby. I know you too well, all your bullying in my childhood. So I did a little fact check on your claims about Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. Okay. Sky Moore last year in the playoffs had a total of 17 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown.
Touchdown. All that matters.
Okay. And then you got David Tyree, who had like 47 receiving yards, 1 touchdown.
Oh, so he did better than you thought. It wasn't just a one catch, one.
Kadarius Toney had even less receiving yards than
but he had a huge punt return in that game that changed the game.
Oh my gosh. This is what happens when people become delusional, folks. Stay tuned.
We'll see you in the playoffs if you make it. Should be a fun NFL season, folks. With that, we'll let you get to Monday Night Football. And thanks for watching Sports Talk, The Generation Gap, episode 13.